The translation chamber hummed with an electrical tension that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had never experienced before. Sterile white walls reflected the soft blue glow of holographic interfaces, creating an environment that felt simultaneously clinical and alien. Her fingers danced across the linguistic matrix, calibrating real-time translation algorithms that had taken her team years to develop. Across from her sat Zaxthor, a Kelteri diplomat whose physical form defied easy human description. Imagine a being composed of interconnected crystalline structures that shifted and realigned with each subtle movement, like living mercury caught in a complex dance. Where humans had solid bodies, Zaxthor appeared more like a three-dimensional network of shimmering, interconnected nodes that pulsed with an inner bioluminescence. Communication protocols initializing, Elena muttered, her dark brown eyes focused on the complex data streams scrolling across her neural interface. She had spent a decade preparing for this moment, the first comprehensive linguistic exchange with a truly alien intelligence. The Kelteri diplomatic mission represented humanity's first sustained contact with an extrasolar civilization that didn't immediately want to categorize humans as potential prey or competitors. Previous encounters had been tense, competitive, often bordering on hostile. But the Kelteri were different. They seemed genuinely curious. Zaxthor's crystalline form rippled, a movement that Elena's translation matrix interpreted as both a greeting and a complex emotional state that roughly translated to anticipatory collaborative excitement. Traditional linguistic models would have struggled, but her advanced algorithms caught the nuanced communication. Linguistic resonance at 62.3% alignment, the chamber's AI announced in its neutral tone. Most xenolinguists would have considered this a promising start, but Elena knew better. 62% meant there were still massive communication gaps. What made this encounter unique was Elena's unconventional approach. While most researchers relied solely on technological interfaces, she believed in a more holistic method. Her team had integrated psychological profiling, cultural anthropological data, and advanced machine learning to create a more adaptive translation system. Zaxthor's form suddenly pulsed with an unexpected intensity. The crystalline structures began to rotate and realign, creating geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an internal rhythm. Elena's neural interface started producing strange, fragmented sensations, not quite emotions, not quite thoughts, but something in between. Unexpected neural synchronization detected, the AI warned. But Elena was fascinated, not afraid. Her years of research had prepared her for multiple scenarios, but nothing quite like this. The Kelteri communication system wasn't just about exchanging words or even complex ideas. It was a living, breathing network of shared experiences, where individual consciousness seemed more like a fluid concept than a fixed state. Fascinating, Elena whispered, her academic detachment slowly giving way to genuine wonder. Zaxthor's response came not through sound or traditional language, but through a series of intricate crystalline realignments that her interface struggled to translate. It was less like receiving a message and more like experiencing a memory that wasn't entirely her own. In that moment, Dr. Elena Rodriguez realized this wasn't going to be just another diplomatic meeting. This was the beginning of something far more profound, a potential revolution in how intelligent species could communicate and understand each other. The translation chamber continued to hum, bearing silent witness to the first sparks of an extraordinary connection that would soon challenge everything humanity understood about consciousness, communication, and the very nature of individual identity. The research facility buzzed with an uncomfortable energy. Elena sat in the debriefing room, her fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, trying to process the previous day's extraordinary encounter with Zaxthor. The neural scan reports lay scattered across the table, each page filled with anomalies that made her research team nervous. Dr. Marcus Chen, her lead neurological researcher, looked more like a worried parent than a scientist. "The synchronization patterns are unlike anything we've ever seen," he said, pointing to a complex graph that looked more like abstract art than scientific data. It's as if Zaxthor's consciousness doesn't recognize individual boundaries the way we do. Alina understood the implication. Humans viewed their mind as a private sanctuary, a personal space with clear borders. The Keltari, however, seemed to perceive consciousness like a shared network, fluid, interconnected, constantly exchanging information. That afternoon, Zaxthor arrived for their second meeting. The crystalline being's form shifted and pulsed, creating patterns that Alina was slowly learning to interpret. What looked like random movements to an untrained eye were actually complex emotional and communicative gestures. We wish to understand. The translation matrix converted Zaxthor's crystalline movements. Why humans construct walls around their experiences. Alina chose her words carefully. Privacy is crucial for us. Our thoughts, our inner experiences, they're deeply personal. The response came as a wave of confusion that made her neural interface pulse with an uncomfortable intensity. It wasn't rejection, exactly. More like genuine incomprehension. Zaxthor's form rippled in what the translation matrix interpreted as a mixture of curiosity and mild frustration. But experiences are meant to be shared. To isolate is to weaken. To separate is to diminish collective understanding. The conversation was a delicate dance of misunderstanding. Each word, each gesture revealed the vast gulf between human and Keltari perception of individual experience. During a break, Alina noticed something peculiar. Zaxthor seemed to be subtly probing the edges of her consciousness, not aggressively, but with the same casual curiosity a human might use to touch an interesting texture. It was an unconscious gesture, like breathing, for the Keltari. "You're trying to connect," Alina said suddenly, without my explicit permission. The crystalline form froze, the closest approximation of a human looking caught red-handed. Dr. Chen watched the interaction with scientific fascination. "It's not malicious," he whispered to Alina. "For them, this is as natural as conversation is for us. Like how we might lean in to hear someone better, they're trying to lean in to understand." The incident revealed a fundamental difference. Where humans saw boundaries as protection, the Keltari saw them as obstacles to mutual understanding. Each attempt to connect was an act of friendship, of trust, completely misunderstood by human standards. By the day's end, Alina felt mentally exhausted. The neural interfaces showed heightened activity, strange synchronization patterns that medical staff found both alarming and fascinating. She was developing a unique communication protocol, bridging two fundamentally different ways of experiencing consciousness. Zaxthor's final communication that day was both an apology and an invitation. The crystalline form pulsed with what could only be described as emotional vulnerability, a recognition that their method of connection might be overwhelming to human perception. "We wish to understand," the translation matrix rendered, "not to invade." Alina realized they were both explorers, not just of space or language, but of consciousness itself. Each misunderstanding was a step toward comprehension, each awkward interaction a bridge between two radically different ways of existing. The real challenge was just beginning. The International Xenodiplomacy Conference was supposed to be a routine gathering of Earth's most brilliant minds and alien representatives. Gleaming holographic displays filled the massive circular chamber, representing delegations from 12 different star systems. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center, her dark blue professional suit a stark contrast to the alien beings surrounding her. Zaxthor's crystalline form hovered nearby, pulsing with an energy that suggested something was about to happen. Alina felt a familiar tingling at the base of her skull, the neural interface warning her of potential communication anomalies. Ambassador Michael Harrison was mid-speech when the incident began. "Our continued diplomatic relations depend on mutual respect and clear communication boundaries," he droned, completely unaware of the impending chaos. Zaxthor's form suddenly expanded, sending tendrils of shimmering light toward Alina. To the Keltari, what was about to happen was the ultimate gesture of trust and friendship. To every human in the room, it looked like an attack. The crystalline appendages reached for Alina's neural interface, seeking to establish what the Keltari considered a profound connection. In their culture, sharing consciousness was the deepest form of communication, more intimate than any human conversation, more meaningful than any verbal exchange. Alina's training kicked in instantly. Years of xenological research and preparation had equipped her with defensive protocols against unexpected neural intrusions. Her neural interface began to create complex defensive patterns, pushing back against Zaxthor's attempt to merge consciousness. "No," she shouted, both verbally and through her neural systems. But for Zaxthor, her resistance was incomprehensible. The other Keltari delegates began to pulse with confusion and what could only be described as diplomatic concern. Their body language, a complex dance of crystalline shifts and light patterns, suggested they saw Alina's resistance as a potential threat. Security personnel moved in slow motion. The human guards looked uncertain. Was this an attack? A diplomatic gesture? The alien representatives from other species watched with a mix of horror and fascination. Dr. Marcus Chen, watching from the sidelines, realized what was happening. The Keltari didn't just want to communicate with Alina. They wanted to fundamentally experience her consciousness, to merge their understanding in a way no human could comprehend. "It's a sharing attempt," Chen muttered into his communication device. "They're trying to include her in their collective consciousness." The neural interfaces went haywire. Holographic displays flickered, showing fragmented images of consciousness, part human, part alien, a kaleidoscope of experiences and memories that no single being was meant to process. Alina's mind became a battlefield. Her carefully constructed mental barriers fought against the Keltari's intrusion, creating a spectacular display of psychological resistance. To the alien delegates, it looked like she was weaponizing her individual consciousness, something entirely unprecedented. Zaxthor's form began to destabilize, the crystal-like structures becoming agitated and unpredictable. What was meant to be a gesture of ultimate trust had turned into a potential interspecies incident. Ambassador Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down. This is a diplomatic event." But it was too late. The damage was done. Alina stood at the center of the chamber, her neural interface smoking slightly, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and scientific fascination. The Keltari delegates had withdrawn, their forms pulsing with what could only be described as confusion and mild embarrassment. Something fundamental had changed. This was no longer just a diplomatic meeting. It was the beginning of a fundamental challenge to how different species understand communication, consciousness, and the very nature of individual identity. Zaxthor's final communication that day was simple yet profound. "We did not understand. Now we begin to learn." The underground monitoring facility was a maze of glowing screens and humming computers. Alien intelligence analysts from multiple star systems huddled around holographic displays, their attention fixed on one individual, Dr. Alina Rodriguez. "Unprecedented neural resistance," muttered Krelax, a senior Valerian intelligence operative. His tentacle-like appendages danced across multiple communication interfaces. She didn't just block the connection. She weaponized her resistance. The incident at the diplomatic conference had transformed Alina from a simple xenolinguist into something far more intriguing. Where other species saw consciousness as a fluid, shareable resource, she had demonstrated a level of mental fortitude that bordered on the impossible. 3 days after the conference, Alina discovered she was being watched. Black unmarked vehicles followed her research vehicle. Her personal communications were subtly intercepted. Even her home network showed signs of sophisticated monitoring. Dr. Marcus Chen confirmed her suspicions during a secret meeting in a small cafe. "It's not just the Keltari anymore," he whispered, sliding an encrypted data pad across the table. "Multiple alien intelligence agencies are analyzing your neural scans. They believe your ability to resist collective consciousness might be a form of psychological weapon." The irony was not lost on Alina. Her dedication to understanding alien communication had made her a potential threat in the eyes of those same aliens. Zaxthor's communication channels went silent after the conference. The diplomatic connection that had seemed so promising now felt like a minefield of misunderstandings and potential conflicts. Back at the research facility, Alina's team worked around the clock. They discovered something extraordinary in her neural scans. Her brain's defensive mechanisms weren't just blocking external consciousness. They were actively creating complex, adaptive barriers that seemed to evolve in real time. It's like her brain is writing its own firewall, Dr. Chen explained, pointing to a series of complex neural patterns. Most species have static mental boundaries. Alina's are dynamic, intelligent, constantly reconfiguring. The alien intelligence agencies saw something else entirely. To them, her resistance looked like a potential psychological warfare technique. If humans could develop methods to completely block neural sharing, it would fundamentally challenge the communication methods of collective consciousness species. Late one night, Alina received an encrypted message. The sender was unknown, but the authentication code suggested a high-level diplomatic origin. "Your resistance is not weakness," the message read. "It is an unexpected form of strength." The next morning, surveillance footage showed something strange. The black vehicles that had been following Alina suddenly disappeared. Communication intercepts from alien intelligence networks revealed a growing debate. Some argued that Alina represented a significant threat, a human who could potentially develop methods to completely isolate individual consciousness. Others saw her as a fascinating research subject, a key to understanding the diversity of mental adaptation. Krellax, the Valerian intelligence operative, summarized the situation in a classified report. Humans are not just another species. They are psychological innovators, capable of transforming communication itself. Alina understood she had become more than a researcher. She was now a living experiment, a potential bridge or barrier between fundamentally different ways of experiencing consciousness. Her phone rang. The caller ID was blocked, but the communication signature was unmistakable. Zaxthor was attempting contact again. The psychological warfare was just beginning. The research facility's secure laboratory felt more like a battlefield of consciousness than a scientific space. Alina Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers tracing complex neural pattern maps that represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Marcus Chen watched her work, a mixture of awe and scientific excitement radiating from his expression. "We're not just looking at individual resistance," he said softly. "We're discovering the true nature of human cognitive diversity." What the alien intelligence agencies saw as a potential weapon, Alina was beginning to understand as humanity's most extraordinary evolutionary adaptation. Most galactic species operated on principles of uniformity. Collective consciousness meant shared thoughts, synchronized experiences, and minimal individual deviation. The Keltari, the Valerians, even the hyper-intelligent silicon-based cores, all believed that strength came from uniformity. Humans were different, spectacularly, fundamentally different. Alina's research revealed a stunning truth. Human psychological variation wasn't a weakness. It was an unprecedented survival mechanism. Where other species sought harmony, humans thrived on disagreement, on multiple perspectives, on the constant friction of different ideas. Her neural mapping showed something extraordinary. While alien species had relatively uniform brain response patterns, human brains demonstrated incredible variability. Two humans could experience the exact same event and process it completely differently. This wasn't a flaw. It was a feature. Imagine a species where every individual is a unique problem-solving module. Alina explained to her team, her excitement building, where disagreement isn't a barrier, but a method of generating more comprehensive solutions. The holographic displays began showing comparative analyses. Alien species had smooth, almost identical neural networks. Human networks looked like complex, chaotic fractals, unpredictable, adaptive, constantly reforming. Dr. Chen pulled up historical human achievements. Every major breakthrough, scientific, social, technological, came from individuals who thought differently, who challenged existing paradigms, who refused to be absorbed into a collective thought process. The Keltaries' attempt to share consciousness with Alina had backfired spectacularly. Instead of revealing her weaknesses, it had exposed humanity's most powerful evolutionary adaptation, the ability to maintain individual identity while simultaneously collaborating. "They see our resistance as a threat," Alina muttered, "but it's actually our greatest strength." Surveillance footage from multiple alien intelligence agencies confirmed the growing confusion. Psychological profiles of humans were being rewritten. No longer were humans seen as a young, potentially aggressive species. They were becoming something far more intriguing, an entirely new model of intelligent existence. The neural interfaces started generating something unprecedented. Complex predictive models that showed how human psychological diversity could solve problems that collective consciousness species couldn't even perceive. A message came through Alina's secure communication channel. The sender was unexpected. "The Galactic Diplomatic Court. Your research is redefining interspecies understanding." The message read, "Continue." Outside the research facility, the world continued its normal rhythm. Most humans remained unaware that their very way of thinking was being examined as a potential revolutionary communication model. Alina looked at the complex neural maps, a smile forming on her face. Humanity wasn't just another species trying to fit into the galactic community. They were about to transform how that community understood intelligence itself. The psychological revolution had begun, and it would be distinctly, wonderfully human. The Keltari communication hub vibrated with collective confusion. Zaxthor's crystalline form pulsed with an energy that suggested internal turmoil, a state almost unprecedented in their hyper-connected species. Standard protocol demanded immediate assimilation of the new information about humans, but something different was happening. Zaxthor was experiencing what might be closest to individual reflection, a concept almost alien to their collective consciousness. The neural archives replayed the encounter with Alina Rodriguez repeatedly. Each replay revealed new layers of complexity that challenged everything the Keltari understood about communication and consciousness. Where other Keltari saw Alina's resistance as a threat, Zaxthor saw something revolutionary. Her ability to maintain individual integrity wasn't a weakness. It was an extraordinary adaptive mechanism. Deep within the communication matrix, Zaxthor began reconstructing their understanding. Humans didn't just resist sharing. They created value through their differences. Each human brain was like a unique algorithm, capable of generating solutions that a collective consciousness could never imagine. Dr. Chen's research documents, intercepted through diplomatic channels, became a crucial dataset. They revealed how human disagreement wasn't destructive. It was a sophisticated problem-solving mechanism. Historical human achievements started making sense in a new context. The scientific revolutions, artistic movements, technological innovations, all emerged from individuals who refused to be constrained by collective thinking. Resistance is not isolation. Zaxthor's internal communication began to shift. It is a form of dynamic adaptation. The Keltari High Council found Zaxthor's emerging perspective dangerous. Challenging the fundamental belief of collective consciousness was tantamount to heresy in their culture. But Zaxthor had experienced something profound during the brief neural contact with Alina. Her mind wasn't a fortress to be breached. It was a complex, evolving system of incredible sophistication. Surveillance recordings showed Alina's neural defensive mechanisms. They weren't static barriers but dynamic, intelligent systems that could adapt in milliseconds. Each potential intrusion was met with a unique, unpredictable response. The more Zaxthor analyzed, the more they understood. Human non-sharing wasn't about protection. It was about maintaining the potential for unique perspective, a living, breathing mechanism of cognitive innovation. In the communication hub, Zaxthor's crystalline form began to shift in patterns that suggested something close to excitement, an emotion barely understood in their collective system. "We have been interpreting communication incorrectly," Zaxthor communicated to the High Council. "Humans don't block connection. They optimize it through diversity." The diplomatic implications were massive. If humans could maintain individual integrity while still collaborating, they represented a completely new model of intelligent interaction. Zaxthor requested a direct communication channel with Elena Rodriguez. The High Council hesitated, but the mounting evidence of human cognitive complexity was undeniable. A message was prepared. Simple, direct, transformative. We wish to understand, not to merge. Teach us about your differences. Outside the communication hub, stars continued their silent dance. Galaxies spun in their cosmic trajectories. And somewhere on Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was about to receive a communication that would change everything. The perspective transformation was complete. Zaxthor was no longer just a Keltari diplomat. They had become something else, a bridge between fundamentally different ways of understanding consciousness. Humanity's greatest strength was about to be recognized. The power of being uniquely, wonderfully different. The United Nations Special Xenological Research Center looked more like a high-tech cathedral than a diplomatic facility. Holographic displays flickered with complex neural maps, representing the most ambitious communication protocol in human history. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a circular platform, her hands moving through holographic interfaces with practiced precision. Surrounding her were representatives from 12 different alien species, each watching with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "We're not creating a method of invasion," Elena explained, her voice calm and measured. "We're developing a framework for consensual, limited consciousness sharing." The protocol she had developed was revolutionary. Unlike the Keltari's complete neural merge, this was more like a carefully controlled neural handshake. Participants could share specific information packets, maintaining individual integrity while allowing unprecedented levels of understanding. Zaxthor's crystalline form hovered nearby, pulsing with an energy that suggested both excitement and scientific curiosity. Their presence alone was a testament to the transformative potential of the new communication method. Dr. Marcus Chen explained the technical details. "Think of it as a firewall with selective permission gates," he told the assembled delegates. "Humans can choose exactly what to share, when to share it, and how much to reveal." The alien delegates represented species with fundamentally different communication models. The silicon-based cores, the empathic Valerians, the collective consciousness Keltari, all watched with growing interest. Early test protocols had been promising. In controlled environments, participants could exchange specific memory packets, emotional experiences, and complex conceptual information, all while maintaining complete individual autonomy. Elena's breakthrough came from an unexpected combination of neural mapping techniques, advanced encryption, and a deep understanding of human psychological diversity. Each communication pathway was unique, dynamically generated, and instantly destroyable. "Consent is the fundamental principle," Elena emphasized. "No forced connections, no involuntary sharing. Complete individual control." The diplomatic implications were staggering. Species that had struggled to communicate for centuries could now potentially share experiences without losing their fundamental identity. Zaxthor's communication revealed the depth of their transformation. "We are learning." Their crystalline form pulsed. "That difference is not a barrier. It is the path to understanding." The protocol went beyond simple information exchange. It was a method of building interspecies empathy while respecting individual boundaries. Humans had transformed the concept of sharing from a forced merge to a voluntary, controlled interaction. Representatives from different star systems began running simulation tests. The results were consistently surprising. Where previous communication attempts had failed, this new protocol showed unprecedented levels of mutual understanding. "We're not erasing differences," Elena explained to the assembled delegates. "We're creating a bridge that respects those differences." The first live demonstration would be critical. A carefully selected team of human and alien researchers prepared for the initial full-scale test. Monitoring systems were activated. Neural firewalls were calibrated. The entire scientific community watched with bated breath. Zaxthor moved closer to Alina, their crystalline form suggesting a level of respect that went beyond diplomatic protocol. They had become more than just representatives of their respective species. They were pioneers of a new way of understanding consciousness. "Ready?" Alina asked, her hand hovering over the final activation sequence. The room fell silent. 12 alien species, hundreds of researchers, one unprecedented moment of potential transformation. The diplomatic breakthrough was about to begin. 5 years had passed since the first consensual consciousness protocol was introduced. The galactic landscape of communication had transformed beyond recognition. From the observation deck of the Interstellar Diplomatic Station, Dr. Alina Rodriguez watched the stars with a sense of quiet triumph. Her work had done more than bridge communication gaps. It had fundamentally reimagined how intelligent species could interact. Zaxthor's crystalline form materialized beside her, a gesture that had become familiar and comfortable. Where once their presence would have felt alien, now it represented something closer to friendship. "We have changed everything." Zaxthor's communication matrix translated, a hint of what could only be described as emotional complexity resonating through the words. The protocol they had developed wasn't just a communication method. It was a new model of interspecies understanding. Dozens of civilizations had adopted the human-inspired approach, a method that celebrated individual differences while creating paths for mutual comprehension. Diplomatic missions that once required years of careful negotiation now happened in weeks. Species with completely different biological and psychological structures could share experiences without losing their fundamental identity. Dr. Marcus Chen, now head of the Xenological Research Division, had documented the transformation. Humanity had inadvertently created a communication revolution. Their resistance to collective consciousness, once seen as a weakness, was now recognized as the most sophisticated communication adaptation in known galactic history. The Keltari had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Their collective consciousness model had been fundamentally challenged and redesigned. They now understood that diversity wasn't a threat. It was the most powerful form of collective intelligence. Alina's neural mapping techniques had become a standard in interspecies communication training. Young diplomats from multiple star systems studied her groundbreaking work, learning how to maintain individual integrity while building profound connections. "We did not conquer," Alina reflected, watching the star-filled viewport. "We connected." The Galactic Diplomatic Archives now included a new chapter, one that highlighted humanity's unique contribution. Not as a warrior species, not as technological innovators, but as masters of communication who understood that true understanding comes from respecting differences. Zaxthor's form shifted, creating complex patterns that suggested deep reflection. "Your species sees connection differently," they communicated. "Not as absorption, but as collaboration." Unprecedented diplomatic achievements followed their protocol. The silicon-based Korans, who had been essentially isolated for centuries, now participated in multi-species dialogues. The empathic Valerians discovered ways to share experiences without overwhelming individual consciousness. Alina understood the true significance of their work. It wasn't just about creating a communication method. It was about proving that intelligence could be diverse, that differences could be a source of strength rather than conflict. The interstellar station hummed with the energy of multiple species, their communication interfaces now using the protocol developed by humans. Where once there were barriers, now there were bridges. "We are not finished," Zaxthor communicated. "We are just beginning." Outside, stars continued their ancient dance. Galaxies spun in their cosmic trajectories, and humanity had written itself into the galactic story. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as transformative communicators who showed that the most powerful connection comes from respecting individual identity. Alina smiled. The greatest journey of understanding had just begun.